Sunday, the 24th of November, 2024, Need to Know News. Let's take a look at those topics and have opening statements. We're going to the war, escalating to an apparent World War III, at least a scare event, border security versus the so-called official Operation Mockingbird, corporate media bullshit lies of omission and commission, 2024 election fallout, and in honor of JFK and their honest family members, 61 years after his CIA-led government assassination, covered by Mockingbird corporate media, as criminal co-conspirators required to pimp the scriptwriter's official his story. And that's because the facts are emperor's new clothes. Obvious that it was our own government who assassinated JFK. Brian, opening statement, brother.
I was saying to the colleague there that I see and I know that there are a lot of people that take the perspective that the current nature of the transition from Biden to Trump is not going to change anything. And I understand people that are skeptical about Trump, and I understand people that are skeptical about whether or not he can actually make a dent in the deep state. But I think he is. I think he can. Now, they're obviously going to be kicking against the goads and fighting back in every way they know how because they don't want their secrets exposed. And right now, with putting Gates up and Pam Bondi up, I think there's a real possibility that there's some of their secrets could be exposed, and just some might be enough to get the dominoes to begin to fall. And so I'm hopeful at this point in time that things will change. I don't think they're going to change as, dramatically and as fast as a lot of people think they will. I don't think, 100 days into the presidency, we're going to see these big breakthroughs. But to me, the number one priority of the administration is justice, is to get some of these criminals out of the way, get the public lynchings, and I don't mean lynchings, I mean public trials, trial by media, and exposure of the facts through independent news organizations such as James O'Keefe and many others out there, American Institute for Justice, and I can think of a lot of different organizations that would break stories, including Gateway Pundit, Zero Hedge, many of the others. And I think that there's some real possibilities that things are going to change. So I'm taking a real positive perspective at this point in time, but how it's going to shake out, I don't know. You would expect an assassination, something of that nature, but I don't know that for a fact.
Yeah, for me, the key thing is that we don't know. This is war and the fog of war, and we don't know what's going on. At the same time, I do feel optimistic also, and I do predict that we're going to have a major breakthrough. I think that we're going to have this paper economic collapse. And really, in terms of the war, Israel, the United States, and the UK are now isolated as rogue nations. And we'll see, but Trump is still giving rhetoric for the war, still giving the rhetoric and for COVID. So it's no victory yet. All right, let's go to the war. Got a bunch of those updates. Update: Russia wipes Ukrainian defense plant using ICBM Oreshnik missile, the first time in warfare. And Putin says there's no countermeasures for this weapon. It can carry 4 individual thermonuclear warheads. And we have seen that. That's a big deal. And the analysis is that it's not an ICBM. It's a hypersonic missile, an intermediate range hypersonic missile, and it's going to go about 2,000 miles, and it's going to go at Mach 10, which is about 800 miles an hour. And let's take a little look at the deployment of this.
Russia has introduced a new hypersonic intermediate-range ballistic missile called Oreshnik, which has broken the record for the fastest missile in the world. It is the fastest missile ever developed, achieving an incredible speed of Mach 10, making it extremely difficult to intercept. Previously, the title of the fastest missile belonged to the 3M-22 Zircon, also developed by Russia, with a top speed of approximately Mach 9. Surprisingly, the Russian president announced the development of the Oreshnik after its reported combat use in Ukraine. What do we know so far about the specifications of this new missile, and what does its development indicate regarding its use in the ongoing conflict in Ukraine?
Right, well, that's enough of it. And the Mach 10 is 8,000 miles an hour, and it's a MIRV, a multiple independently targeted re-entry vehicle, 4 nukes, each of which is going to pack more punch than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Hey, we have That's What You Wanted? You damn well got it. Former Russian President Medvedev taunts the West after Russia launches the hypersonic ballistic attack on Ukraine. See if I can get this back. Nope, it's not going to do it. So what was that story?
It was Putin. Is it the one the U.S. is instigating the war with Russia?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll just
yeah.
recopy
It's
this.
basically talking about how the roles have been reversed, that Russia is not the aggressor, that it's the Western forces that are acting in Ukraine, that are really the problem. And they point out the same thing that we've been pointing out for a long time on the shows, that the that the reason that Russia had to go to war was to defend itself. Basically, they said that Western forces had used a color revolution to commit a coup of the government in Ukraine, and Ukraine borders Russia. Then they used it as a staging apparatus for a military invasion slash establishment of missile silos, and that Russia has no choice but to go to war, but to defend itself from Western advances. And now the same thing is going to happen in Poland, was the nature of the story. And of course, we've known that for a long time. If you think about the roles being reversed, what if Russia committed a coup in Mexico and then used the Mexico border to launch an invasion on America, and set up missile silos to send long range intercontinental ballistic missiles up here? And that's essentially what's going on. If you take a look and go through your neighborhood, remember all the Ukraine flags that people were posting out in front of their houses, and the Facebook posts where they were changing their background to the Ukraine flag. Fools knew nothing of the nature of uh, that the history there, and the Western powers and apparatuses that were using Ukraine like puppeteers. And look how rich Zelensky's gotten by selling out his own people. Look at how many Ukrainian human beings have been killed as a result of this quote unquote war. Foolish activity all around. Plus, we're poking the bear. And remember, the number one rule of war was don't provoke Russia. So at this point in time, it's my expectation uh, that has to be reversed in all of the United States media, and people need to begin to understand that Russia has protected itself, just like Donald Trump has a mandate to change America via internal changes. Putin has the same mandate to protect his people if he's going to keep. And remember, he's under a lot of political pressure as well. So that's my overall analysis of the situation.
Good summary, brother. Yeah, if the roles were reversed, it would be obvious. It's tragic comic, and this is what the U.S. always does. I'll put into the show notes the U.S. illegal 11-part series that I wrote that just goes back into history, kind of a top 10 list of U.S. wars. They're all the same. They violate treaties, they lie about it, and that's what happens. And we're rolled again and again and again. And we'll see how much the U.S. public have absorbed of the facts. U.S. and Israel attacked the ICC over the arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant. Yeah, 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 and because the U.S. is going to be next, and the U.K. is going to be next for arming them. It's not even close to legal is the problem. Caitlin Johnstone, if you want to help the empire, if you want to help the world, focus on fighting the empire. And as I've said, yes. And this is an excellent essay if you want to read through it, is that I'll just read one of them. Become a soldier because you want to be of service, and you will discover that being a soldier doesn't work the way it's depicted in movies and shows. You're not a hero defending your country from murderous thugs. You are the murderous thugs, and the people you are murdering are trying to defend their country from you. Cops, lawyers, politicians, journalists, teachers, therapists, social worker, entertainment. It's all lies. It's all an empire. Today in Imperial Recklessness and Insanity, Caitlin Johnstone gives some of the highlights of what has happened, and again pointing out the break from an obvious next step would be Israel cannot conduct this lie-started war of aggression without being armed, without the U.S., without the UN pretending to care and virtue signaling, but doing nothing. It is the most, as they all are, Orwellian illegal war of aggression. All right, anything else, partner?
Yeah, let me sort of summarize this, okay? Caitlin Johnson, she wrote that particular piece. It was called, what was the piece called? If you want to help the world, focus on fighting the empire. And she's right. Now, a lot of people don't understand exactly how the empire was constructed right under our noses, in spite of the Constitution and in spite of the transparency that's supposed to be present in the establishment and operation of the government. But as we all know, transparency is nothing more than a game to be played between bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. at the federal level and even at the state level, and the public and the citizens. And the citizens are largely fragmented, largely built on paying attention to our jobs and our incomes and our families. That ought to be the job, of media. Media has not been doing its job because it's been captured under the Operation Mockingbird and many other programs that have been put into place in order to conceal the existence of what I would say is a series of institutional influences that originate from secret society type organizations. And so we could go down the list of secret society type organizations and look for the boogeyman, and some people will say, oh, it's Israel, and some people will say, oh, it's the British, and some people say, oh, it's the Jesuits, oh, it's the Freemasons, oh, it's this organization or that organization. And so there's all sorts of theories as to what does this secret institution look like. But I can tell you this: the secret institutions seem to be working in unison to conduct the capture of our institutions. They do it by making sure that their people that were trained in their structures are installed into the top tiers of all of these institutions. So take a look at the American Bar Association. And Johnston makes the argument, okay, lawyers went into it because they believe in the power of the law. Yeah, Hollywood, lawyers, good guys. But then they get into it and they realize, no, it's just about serving and protecting the establishment. And it's the same thing with the butcher and the baker and the candlestick maker. The institutions themselves have been corrupted from the very top level. Guys, this is not rocket science. If you have the power and control and you use your money wisely to influence different associations, you can make sure that your people are installed at the proper level to get your agenda accomplished. And whether or not it's a global conspiracy agenda or who the boogeyman really is, I can tell you this: it is a combination of billionaires, dark forces, and the only way that those organizations are going to be exposed is going to be with an unraveling of an Epstein level conspiracy that begins to root out corruption at massive levels. And I think if we go after the pedos on the billionaire class, then all the king's men will begin to fall. Humpty Dumpty will be broken, and we can begin to reevaluate society. But what's going to prevent it from happening again? Are we going to need another leader like Donald Trump to do it again? Or are the American people going to gird up their loins and begin to protect themselves? I think we're in a good place where there's an opportunity for a guy like Elon Musk and others to come in and begin to redesign the structures. One of the things that's great about both Donald Trump and Musk and many of the others that they've picked is that they seem to be iconoclasts. Look at, I mean, Musk said that he dumped 80% of the workers at Twitter. Um, Donald Trump obviously has run a real estate machine that for years, where he's probably cut the expenses where they were necessary to cut and left expenses that were necessary to leave. But he knows how to run a business and he knows how to make people happy. The bigger question about Donald Trump is leadership genuinely interested in change? And I would ask that. In other words, I would ask the question, how much do the Adelsons control them? Miriam Adelson, Sheldon Adelson, how much are they interested? Because I see really what's at the heart and center of the problem. The more I look into it, I see Israel sort of being the number one boogeyman. And so here is Israel with it, and we have a chance to topple the regime. How's that going to work out? That's why we had put the International Criminal Court in. That's why the world is taking a look at Israel as the new boogeyman and maybe exposing Israel for what it is, the new boogeyman. So the question is, why is America so busily insulating ourselves from the rulings of the International Criminal Court? I guess we don't sign on to it, neither does Russia. So who cares? Well, there's a lot of people that care because Western hegemony is beginning to have a break in the center in terms of, do we respect them or don't we respect them? Because if we respect them, let's apply the rules evenly. And that means America's war criminals need to go down just as well. George Bush, Biden, Barack Obama, you name them. You name them. And you could even say Trump. I mean, tell me COVID wasn't, that happened under Trump. That happened under Trump, man. Is he part of it? Well, did he have the power to prevent it? Did he have an interest in preventing it? Why did he let the machine do it? Is he an international criminal too? I don't know. I mean, Donald Trump didn't start COVID. Chinese started COVID, but he was considered the father of the vaccine, I guess. So he's a part of the problem too. Although that's a whole roundabout analysis of the state of the world today from those couple of articles. But I think it's important to always reconsider the big picture in terms of where are we going to go and how are we going to achieve our goals and how are those goals going to be implemented? How are the plans for those systems to be implemented? Anyway, tirade, 10,000-foot overview. Some of you might appreciate it, some might not.
Well stated. Thank you, brother. Yeah, the Emperor's New Clothes obvious observation is that the U.S. actions are illegal and not even close. The wars are, you're not supposed to do a war, but everything is captured, everything is inverted, everything is controlled. And when you're talking about Israel, it does seem as if they are a literal and figurative chosen people without empathy to be put into key positions to implement the policies of the empire. And it is across nations that they engage in the empire. And we need a breakthrough. And but I'm optimistic. I think enough has filtered through for the truth, and that the right event, it'll be over for these guys. But we'll see. All right, border security versus the official Operation Mockingbird corporate media bullshit lies of omission and commission. Illegal alien arrested for raping a 14-year-old girl in Denver as Democrat mayor declares war on Trump's plan to deport criminal aliens. And that's the optic, and that is the choice, and that is the polarization. And the polarization, the shattering event, will cause a clear separation between sides. And, I'm hoping for literally about a 19-to-1 ratio, a 95% for the truth, and only about 5% can hang on to this ridiculous narrative. Lake and Riley's killer is convicted, but the media must protect the narrative. And the Washington Post, AP, and the New York Times all refused to describe Laken Riley's murderer as an illegal immigrant. Instead, he's a Venezuelan national, a man, Venezuelan migrant, and that is how they roll. Former NBC anchor Brian Williams suggests the Democrats lost working class voters by insulting them with gaslighting. And I want to play a little bit of this because it is just such a brilliant example of propaganda. And this is what we're up against.
It did feel like the Democratic Party under Joe Biden did a lot of things for working class voters. Certainly inflation was a giant issue. Messaging as well. Do you feel like they just failed to message what they had done for and had planned for the economy?
It is tough love.
Now, what a fucking load of shit that question is. Just a failure of messaging. No, they didn't deliver anything, and they did deliver the inflation, among other things. But they're just taking the assumption that the uniparty is right.
Time for the Democratic Party. I think it needs to be stripped down and rebuilt. I think that means a change in leadership. I want to know who thought it was a good idea that Joe Biden stand for another 4 years at 80 years of age and 37% popularity. So then that saddled the party with a British-like short campaign season for them. I think it's insulting when members of the working class, which the Democratic Party has lost entirely in our lifetimes, to insist the economy is doing great. A 12-pack of Bounty is $40. Rich folks don't feel that. Poor folks already switched to Sparkle during the during the lockdown. And I think telling them that the NASDAQ is gangbusters is further insulting. It's insulting, I think, the biggest unforced error of the Biden administration.
Now, that is a phrase that was done with focus group, an unforced error. Oh, they were trying to do the right thing?
By far was the border. To tell people it's not a problem is insulting. For the working class to see incoming migrants getting welcome bags, debit cards, and motel rooms is probably insulting as well. So there's a lot of work to do. You know, it was when they handed out camo hats that said Harris Walls, and the Democrats they were kind of charmed by that. Their party has gone quinoa, and the rest of America's eating at Cracker Barrel. And so it was kind of an ironic.
That's kind of a generous interpretation, but that's what they're going to do. They're just going to, I'll give them the other seconds.
Millions of Americans put on their heads to start their day every day.
Yeah, and they're going to virtue signal, and they're going to try to pull it all back, and we'll see how they do. And let's see.
By that, then you could say DEI was a distraction. I mean, was DEI a distraction from the real issue? Did they overplay their hand on that? Was that an actual issue? Or was it more of something that was designed to keep us away from focusing on the important issues? I tend to think that it really was, that it was methinks the lady does protested too much in terms of, hey, let's talk about trans issues. Let's talk about slavery. Let's talk about, historical errors that our founding fathers made. Let's talk about anything except for let's talk about the actual state of living. And it's the same thing with the border issue, illegals that came across the border too. So were all those things, in hindsight, simply a distraction from a declining disruptive agenda? And I tend to look at the Democrats like I look at Bud Light. Bud Light, I think, made the mistake of using that little faggot boy in their advertising campaign. But I think I don't think that was an unforced error on behalf of Bud Light. I think it was the strings attached to the money lending terms that they had with the bank structures. The bank structures were running this sort of social, economic programs where if you comply with the DEI agenda on X level, then you're going to get better financing terms for this money or that money. And so you saw John Deere go that way. You saw Tractor Supply go that way. You saw a number of different organizations that were like, you would think of them sort of as American institutions, but instead they're out there, go fags, you know. It didn't make any sense. There's no leadership in the world that would have authorized something like that. And it turns out it was because the banks were offering better deals to push the agenda. Okay, that again is the conspiracy beginning to reveal its ugly face and its ugly purpose. The agenda was pushed throughout all the institutions. Look at the Navy. I mean, that freak that they had at the very top, that man that dressed up like a woman that, I mean, freaks. They installed freaks. Was it to distract us, to mock us? Was it a ritual? Was it a humiliation ritual? But they did it. They did it to us because they thought they could control us on that level. And that's why I hope that this new administration truly is something where they feel like they have a mandate to stamp this stuff out. Because it was, again, the societies run by the banksters and the global cartels that push these agendas throughout these organizations in order to accomplish their, what I would say, satanically influenced goals of embarrassing God by disrobing and shaming his creation with homosexuality and transgender. And it's sort of like, oh, yeah, we know that you're going to win in the long run, but we're going to do everything we can to screw you in the meantime. So watch, we're going to take your beautiful humanity with man and woman. We're going to take the beautiful feminine structure and the beautiful male structure, and we're going to disgrace them by putting men with men and women with women and driving a perversion on such a level. I mean, that to me, that does feel like a satanically influenced perversion, not business as usual. Like this makes sense. And I think that I think the American people are beginning to kick back. And what Brian Williams was just doing is pointing out the obvious. Here the Democrats gaslighted them with all this DEI bullshit when the cost of goods was rising on such a massive scale that, I mean, I can't imagine. I'm generally surrounded by rich clients and rich people, but the job I do takes me into a lot of places where I see people that are poor and suffering. And I'm telling you, it's truly suffering, truly suffering. I have worked the food lines at the local church and the mission, and I can tell you that the vast majority of those people are, some of them are there as opportunists. Most of them are just doing whatever they possibly can do to get along. I mean, can you imagine being an immigrant and having to raise 3 children while your husband's working a sort of low-end job? I mean, can you imagine that right now? It saddens me to think about the actual nature of our poor community right now.
Yep. And the kids were the preponderance of the students that I taught over my 38-year career. And you're asking the right question as to the motivation for these programs. And for me, I agree with you that it is run by the top down, and the poisoning involved, the chemical manipulation to get people confused about their gender and then to manipulate it and encourage it and egg it on. You got to wonder who is writing those scripts when the effect is jump the shark. Yeah, what I think is going on is we have both sides are using an AI, and we did have the white hats decapitate the black hats and then puppet them in such a way that the overwhelmingly dominating programming. I think that these guys, we would have been Great Reset again if Trump wasn't used to infiltrate and then to take the 2016 election. It would have been Hillary and it would have been COVID and everybody would have been shot. And we wouldn't have recovered from that. We wouldn't have made it out of that one. That would have been the key destructive phase that would have ended it. But that said, seeing everything that we see that has so far jumped the shark that has woken people up, I think that now we're set up for the one breakthrough event where the people are going to see sufficiently. And then it's going to be just it's emperor's new clothes obvious, is that once we get this break, then everyone who cares to look with their own eyes are going to come to the same conclusion. But
But
we'll see.
we have a fundamental problem sitting right smack in the middle of the movement. Are we going to be able to work together under central leadership, or are we going to become fragmented, power hungry machines again? And our society is very much layered up on many, many levels. And although our day-to-day living, we're surrounded by normal people, but when you start to move up into the higher power structures, you're dealing with narcissists on an epic scale. And remember the Tea Party? The Tea Party was a great idea. Everybody got along. They went to the park. They did their rallies. They had their talk about the economy, the importance of breaking down inflation. Where the Tea Party, there was some leadership beginning to develop, although the leadership wasn't as strong as it ought to be. And what happened is the media had decided to pull the plug and start to shut it down. And that was the MSM narrative that went that direction. And the Tea Party fragmented up and ended up breaking up and ended up basically shattering into a billion pieces. Why did that happen? What happened? Because leadership was weak. Is leadership now strong? And that's a good question. My instinct, and I had this, remember we were texting, I think it was a few nights ago, just you and I, we were texting back and forth about Donald Trump. Remember the crux of that conversation? Is he the Pied Piper for the New World Order? Or is he a genuine patriot that has achieved this level of leadership inside of our government independently? And is he truly threatening the apparatus? That's the two questions that we have right now. And we've got to begin to address the issues because first time around, I saw a Pied Piper for the New World Order. But the second time around, I don't know, I just get this different feeling that he might actually be able to work with the structures that are in place to begin to radically change society. It was sort of he put together sort of the Olympic level dream team of people that were willing to work to change America again. And I think most of them are genuine, but you've got to remember that even people at the top have personal selfish ambitions. The question is, do they get in the way of the bigger play? So yeah, it remains to be seen. It's an interesting discussion. And obviously, we've got concerns. Everybody's got concerns about Trump's connections with the power apparatus. But I can tell you this, he wouldn't have gotten where he's gotten without those connections. So he's got some favors to pay back. There are going to be some criminals that are going to be protected because they jumped on board with the Trump train. And whatever happens, whether from false motives or pure, at this particular time, I'm going to say we're looking like we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, we'll see, brother. When Trump joined on as a presidential candidate in the summer of 2015, I just dug into him. I had video clips of the wrestling battle of the billionaires. And I said, look at how this man spends his free time. Violent cosplay, where he literally jumped on top of this other billionaire on the ground with just pounding his head in. And for that, when I think about the qualities of a presidential leader, that really kind of knocks it out of contention. But when he became installed as the president, I saw Pro Bowl level defense. That was brilliant. But there was no offense. None. Zip. And a lot of the stupidity of he could have ended the deep state with the JFK files, didn't do it. He could have come out with 9/11, didn't do it. So, and then he could have secured the 2020 election, didn't do it. So then you got to wonder, you have to come up with an explanation that matches those facts. And my current explanation is that this war that we're engaged with an entrenched enemy that has been in command of Earth for thousands of years, maybe hundreds of thousands of years, is that there's a deep underground military base warfare going on. And Gene Decode reports there's like 500 DUMBs in the US, 5,000 around the world. And a lot of those are the adrenochrome farms. And a lot of them have a lot of other stuff that would have to be cleaned out. And in terms for that war to get done, if the evil side was decapitated and Trump is the commander in chief, then you would have a covert war taking place mostly underground. Now, how much of that is true? Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to match the facts. And again, I see that it's all up in the air, prepare for all contingencies and the possibility for a breakthrough, given how much the Great Awakening and the Great Choosing has accomplished with the ordinary Americans. And I am quite optimistic of where the ordinary Americans are at just from my conversations around them. Not among my own family members, but just ordinary
Well, it's true. These days people are they're not shocked. When I sit down with somebody and explain to them Sandy Hook and explain to them why it took place and how much money was transferred to what structures for what purposes, they're not shocked. There was a time when people would laugh me out of the room because everything I said went against the mainstream media, but people are changing, and there has been an awakening, a reemergence of independent critical thought, a re-examination of theories that had been rejected by academia and the mainstream media. I think of, flat Earth being explored on the level that it is, and there's no doubt that the last 5 years, the graph of people that have looked into this just skyrocketing interest. And there's other, I mean, you could look at some other theories that have been thrown out that are getting a lot more traction than they used to. Of course, there was the Planet Nine conspiracy, and there was the Hollow Earth conspiracy, and there was the Freemasonic ritual conspiracies, and the this and that. And there's been thousands of conspiracies. And again, when I got into the game in 2016, I didn't know who to trust. And everywhere I looked, I found information and disinformation, and I began to have to parse that and find the lies and find the holes in thought. I think a lot of people are breaking into that same mode that I was in back in 2016, which is, wait a second. If they lied to me about this, what else did they lie to me about? And I think most importantly, there was a conversation that Matt Gaetz had with Benny Johnson. Yeah, it was a conversation, an interview between Gaetz and Johnson. And Gaetz said, and I think it was covered by Jimmy Dore. It was on the Jimmy Dore YouTube channel. And Gaetz told Benny Johnson his theory that it was the Israelis that extracted Epstein from the Bureau of Prisons, that it was a completely coordinated foreign operation run by Mossad that had extracted Epstein, and that it was covered up by Bill Barr. Guys, the very fact that this conversation is beginning to happen publicly on that level shows, and by the way, that was my original theory as well, because the earliest and most reliable evidence about Epstein's assassination was, I believe, a 4:15 Reddit post in the morning that telegraphed and explained exactly what happened. They said vans came in, extracted the prisoner, teams of military men, but not U.S. military, came out of the vans, extracted the man from the cell, and then exited the premises. And then the cover-up started. That was the earliest and most reliable evidence I was able to find on Epstein. And it was the same thing. But of course, it was buried by all the mainstream media with, oh, did he really commit suicide? If so, how? But my point is, if that defense structure that they have constructed with their billionaire pedophile networks crumbles, I think the sky's the limit. The sky's the limit. And I do believe that there are patriots that still exist, what we'll call white hats, people that are interested in this issue that continue to exist within the realms of our government security industrial complex. And the only problem that I've had with the concept of white hats is that I had believed that they had been effectively purged by an evil and weak leadership. But I don't think that's possible when you consider the nature of pedophilia and the people that would have been exposed to child sex sacrifice and things like that. I don't think that person will ever change after that. I think they'll be able to, will they be able to remain in their position and continue to know that that exists without secretly wanting to join the resistance army that had to be forming within the FBI, even CIA. You know, a lot of these people, before they were corrupted, they were regular people with ambitions. And can you really purge those people from from every layer? Or can you just purge them from the top leadership, which is, I think, what they did. And so the people had to exist inside, and they had to learn to exist with the corruption until they could figure out how to fight back. The question is, how did that force form, and how did it continue if it existed? Because it's true that what you say about the white hats seems eerily plausible, that it exists, that it's there. We just haven't seen the effect of it. But if they were going to run asymmetric warfare, this is exactly how you do it. This is exactly how you do it. You get the people to wake up so that they'll accept it, so that they won't absolutely go insane into civil war when it's exposed. And this operation appears to have been going pretty successfully since, well, when did Pizzagate start? 2014, 2015? Comet Pizza? You had WikiLeaks, the Clinton scandals. Did it form at that particular point in time? And have they been fighting it for close to a decade? Interesting. I'd love to see an insider talk. But right now, all we've got is beforeitsnews.com telling us some bullshit that never happens. That's all we got. That's the only thing that's left on this thing.
Yeah, I think that you're on the right track there with taking a step back, and that we're trying to put pieces together, but fog of war, our seats in the stands, and the explanation for how the White Hats would have been in a position to implement change would be that we needed help from friends in high places to decapitate people at the top. And we've chatted about this before, and I think it does go back all the way to the Old Testament Elohim, and that we had some angels on our side take care of business up at the top. And then when you have NSA, with NSA having the capacity to expose and end any resistance from anybody at top, and I'll put into the show notes at BitChute the documentation for this, which includes Trump's 2017 tour. With the chatter for that is that NSA had envelopes for all of these political leaders, and they gave them the envelope, and they said, "We have it all. We have it all." And that they're going to be puppeted from now on. Now, if they choose not to be puppeted, then they're going to be outed as a pedivore. So they're playing ball. And I think that what we're seeing is the implementation of orders that intentionally jumped the shark while this underground war was going on. And that among the options, like, I don't know about anybody else. I know my own experience with my own family members is that despite all of the progress towards truth, all of them voted for the actor playing Biden. And none of them are prepared to see the criminality yet. So the risk of civil war or just the fracture of human psychology, I agree that that was very real. But that said, I think that everyone's at a point now where if the pedophoria was outed, then I don't think anybody is going back to support those people once that is out, once the facts become clear. And that, of course, will be an art and a science in order to show those cards. And Q has said from the beginning that the end is not for everybody and 5% will be lost forever. Now, as with you, I'm also concluding to myself,
looks more like 40%.
well, we'll see. I think once we have the breakthrough event, that it will be, as you said, eerily plausible. If we get the economic system for the paper collapse, ooh, fuck with people's money, and they are going to be pissed. And especially if we get any opportunity for anybody who knows what they're looking at to like me, to be able to point out, says, yeah, they designed it that way. The 0.1% owned more assets than the 90%. And the exponential like debt curve that is crushing people, as you said, that was intentional. That's how they roll. But we'll see. We're still just chatting.
Yeah, we'll see. We're still just chat. It's all speculation. I can tell you the curves look good in
I
terms
think
of
so
people breaking
too.
loose.
I think so too. All right, let's take a look at some of that election fallout. James O'Keefe taunts Fauci before he drops the NIH tape. Stay tuned. And that would be another huge area of a breakthrough where, whoo, the people hanging on to the official story are going to be pissed.
What do you think about the NIH now that you were working there?
Probably shouldn't be like saying this out loud. I started a new job at NIH. The National Institutes of Health.
Do you think that goes like the mRNA stuff is fake?
I think we're all gonna learn when it's too late. Like the 6-foot rule. That wasn't like based on any real evidence that did anything. It was completely made up. I haven't gotten the latest COVID shots and I'm not going to. It really increases your risk for like heart conditions. I don't want to have a heart attack.
Yeah, that'd be big. Bombshell report. Oversight subcommittee finds the Pentagon deliberately delayed National Guard deployment on January 6th. Cover up by DOD. Inspector General exposed. If we can have a open and fair public consideration of the evidence that Trump asked for the National Guard, Trump tweeted peaceful, and this idea of an invasion, a violent invasion and an insurrection, I mean, that is such bullshit, but you can understand why the Dems had to do it. They had to have J6 as a cover-up for the stolen 2020 election, and that was the move they chose. Doom spiral. The liberal Washington Post is on track to lose a whopping 77 million this year. Well, that's good. That's good. We got this. Nothing left. So earlier we talked about the U.S. debt crossing 36 trillion. And he's saying that the net interest costs are already at nearly $1 trillion. I thought it was the gross, which is a difference with intergovernmental spending. But yeah, I haven't been paying that close of attention. You can see the trend and the direction of it. And obviously that's unsustainable. And the good news, as I keep pointing out, is that going back 300 years since Ben Franklin, is that we have mechanical solutions because this exponential like growth of debt is by design. And if you understand the design, then you don't have to have it be that way. We're creating what we use for money as a negative number owed back to the too big to fail banks. So obviously, if you're only creating what you use for money as a negative number, we can create what we use for money also as a positive number. And that basically is monetary reform. And if you invest that directly into infrastructure, you create the money directly invested into infrastructure. The only real limits of the economy are labor and resources. And investing in infrastructure creates more economic output than the cost of the investment, which is why we do things like buy a car. And we don't say to ourselves, oh, that's too expensive. No, 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 no. You want the car. You got to have the car. You have to invest in that. Life is going to be so much better if you do. And it's true. So we have powerful tools on our side, but we're just going to be chatting about it until we win. Brother, your thoughts?
Well, commenting on economic theory isn't a place where I should play, except I can tell you that post World War One Germany, having been economically absolutely devastated, having experienced hyperinflation, and having been stripped of rights and assets, they were able to rebuild a non-existent currency within a matter of 3 to 5 years by structuring new infrastructure projects such as the Autobahn. And so they went from an absolutely worthless currency that nobody wanted. In 3 to 5 years, they had a currency that was beginning to be in demand and that was able to be used to trade successfully for international goods. This threatened the banksters, and lo and behold, World War II began shortly after that. But that was, I mean, it's possible. It's possible. What worries me today is the weakness of American society. And I would think that given the right set of circumstances and outcry, we would be willing to accept a central bank digital currency all too easily because we don't like the sight of blood, and blood will have to be spilled to resist that concept. And I see a bit of a Black Mirror social credit score type of program in our future. Right now, I see the resistance forming, and hopefully, it's not Donald Trump. Donald Trump's just simply the first of his kind. But this battle is going to have to last for more than 4 years, maybe 20 years, in order to resist what's coming. And we have no idea what the imperial landscape is going to look like 20 years from now. No idea.
Yeah, we don't. Hopefully they're gone already. And other things, technological innovations will make it a lot easier for people to be optimistic about the future and embrace the full truth. I'm very optimistic for the med bed technology, frequency technology. And just if you're interested in what the frequency technology does, just look up on YouTube, find a documentary about Royal Rife, R-I-F-E, and that in the 1930s and 40s, he was on the front page of the LA Times for curing cancer. USC held a dinner for him because USC gave him 20 terminal cancer patients that SC had given up on. Rife disappeared the cancers out of each and every one with just a resonant frequency that, similar to if you have an opera glass, if you had the right pitch, then that would begin to shatter and blow up without anything else being affected. Rife discovered the frequency to destroy the cancer cells, tried it out under the microscope that he invented, called up SC. SC checked it out, found it to be true. They give the trial for the 20 patients. All of them have cancer disappeared. SC announces the end of cancer. They hold a dinner for his honor, front page of the LA Times, and then the officials, the American Medical Association, came in, busted Rife for practicing medicine without a license, even though Rife was smart enough to have all the paperwork and say, nope, I'm just the agent. Here, read it for yourself. This is SC's deal. But SC threw him under the bus. So that was another case. Exactly what you were talking about, Brian, is that the money talks. and that these people at the top are controlled, and that the choices being made up to our world in the present has been, if something pops out for the good, you need to destroy it, you need to smear it, you need to lie about it, you need to call it quackery, and then tell people to go get their chemotherapy.
Well, fundamentally, it's about institutional resistance. I mean, the same thing happened to Tesla. The same thing happened to, you know, water engines, using water to produce power. There was all sorts of advanced alternative uh, things. And of course, there was also alternative medicine in general, not just Royal Rife. And I mean, there's thousands of examples of the institutions that claim to control a certain industry being corrupted. And it could happen in my industry too. I'm a private investigator by trade. That's where my license is, my associations with them. If the proper we're a very fragmented, very small, very uninterested association, but if the right machine was able to put the right people in place, they could definitely control. Let's say that one of us came up with some new technique to analyze all cell phone traffic to determine where every individual is and violate their privacy, but do it in a realistic way. The institutions would come in and shut that down. The institutions would get rid of it. I think it could happen in any industry, and I think that those who play ball with the industries tend to prosper in the past long run. But it's a brave new world, and people are saying that Elon Musk is the new George, or he's the George Soros of the right. His SpaceX is a bunch of bullshit. I mean, an absolute I mean, just a pile of bullshit. But the gaslighting surrounding it is phenomenal. I mean, I don't know how he's managed to control whatever sectors he's controlled to pull that shit off, but I mean, it's an absolute joke watching his videos. Remember the flying car in space?
Uh-huh.
Oh, it looks so, you can tell it's real because it looks so fake. I mean, I think he actually said that. Like,
Yeah, he did say
I mean,
that.
it was just total bullshit. This is like the NASA program. I mean, total bullshit. Obviously, these guys are swimming around in a swimming pool and bubbles are coming out of their helmets and shit. And it's total bullshit. Then you look at the moon video, from 1964. Total bullshit. And oh, NASA's our new hero. There's going to be new products and new fabrics designed by NASA that are going to be able to, resist the unlimited vacuum of space. I mean, what a joke. Give me a break. If space was an unlimited vacuum, like they say, then there is absolutely no way, unless it's a solid object, could travel in it. Uh, maybe I'm, maybe other people are theorizing. I want to believe that space may be the final frontier made in the Hollywood. I've told you before, and I'll say it again, I'm a biblical cosmologist. God separated the waters and created the firmament. It's the way I see it. Prove me wrong.
Yeah, not going to be able to. All right, last topic in honor of JFK and the Honest Family members. All right, this is What Really Happened, a website that I recommend with Mike Rivero. And Mike was the RBN, if I got that acronym right, for the radio show. And the reason that I'm in charge and need to know news is because Jim took over Mike Rivero's position on that radio station. And in terms of the various facts, if you haven't looked at the facts, then I do recommend it. This is some excellent information here. This is the briefing that I have, which is sufficient to be able to, for not only JFK, but RFK and MLK. And this is the 2-hour documentary of colleague and friend John Hankey, a retired LA Unified School District AP US history teacher. And he just goes over the official story that we have gone over again from time and time again. And this documentary, this is actually an upgraded version of the 90-minute documentary. Among my students, I would show in U.S. history class about 100 various little film clips. And this, when I would show clips from this had the greatest demand among the students to be able to watch the whole thing. And I would as well. And this is Jim Fetzer. This is JFK, who was responsible and why. And that is an excellent 2-hour briefing. And we have here, let's hear RFK2 say what he wants to say for 2 minutes here.
A constant pipeline. My uncle, John Kennedy, he realized early on that the purpose of the CIA and the intelligence apparatus was to create a constant pipeline of new wars. Eisenhower, who was the outgoing president, gave what is probably the most important speech in American history, which was, where he warned against the military-industrial complex. I was at my uncle's inauguration. I was in Washington that day, a 6-year-old boy. And 2 months later, the military and intelligence came to him and said, we got to invade Cuba. And he was like, I'm not going to Cuba, and I'm not going to let the military. And they said, well, we got all these Cubans trained, and they're going to go attack Castro. And he said, well, the U.S. government can't be doing that. I don't like what Castro's doing down there, but it's not the United States' job to dictate what kind of governments other countries have. And they said, well, as soon as they land, there's going to be a big revolution. Everybody's going to rise up and they're going to overthrow Castro. And he said, well, you can't use the U.S. military. And they ended up bringing those guys over. And in the middle of it, in the night, they came to him and said, they're getting wiped out on the beach and you need to send in the military and invade. And he said, we're not going to do it. He stepped out of that meeting and he realized they had been lying to him and trying to trick him. And he said, I want to take the CIA and shatter it into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. For the next 1,000 days of his presidency, he was at war with his military and intelligence apparatus. They tried to get him to go into Laos. He said no. They tried to get him to go into Vietnam. They said that we need 250,000 combat troops. He refused. Everybody around him wanted him to go into Vietnam. He sent 16,000 military advisors. They weren't allowed to fight. Many of them did. They violated the rules of engagement. In October of 1963, he heard some of his Green Berets had been killed over there. And he said, I want a total casualty list from Vietnam. And his aide came to him and said, 75 Americans have died. He said, that's too many. And he signed that day a national security order ordering all troops out of Vietnam, U.S. troops. And then a month later, he was killed.
And there you go. That's how it went. And, lost Brian there. In the documentation, that essay, I did another one specifically on JFK. And part of that essay is JFK gave a speech. And the speech in detail showed that the government in Cuba was just an oligarchy with friends of the United States in order to funnel the resources from the people of Cuba into the oligarchs' hands. So if you want to be briefed about JFK, RFK, MLK, there's some documentation for you. Final thoughts. Hang in there. We don't have anything yet to be totally optimistic about, but I do see something breaking for the big. And a lot of us are just looking out there saying, I don't know what to do. I don't see anything to do. And that's just from my particular history of working all the way up to 2 UN summits for heads of state and challenging my school district over their health orders. I don't think that the time is right for any contribution that I can make on a broader scale for any type of I don't want to say a social movement, but a social project. But once we get a breakthrough, I think that there will be openings and that everyone will see for themselves. All right, Patriot audience. And Brian. Thank you, audience members. And we will be back tomorrow with more of the news that you need to know.